Hello and welcome back. It's been a while. I've been really busy recently, so I thought I'd try and make some time to do some live streaming. Today we are going to be building a multi-tenant API boilerplate. We've all seen the new starter kits for Laravel, right? We've the React one, the Vue one, the Livewire one. They're fantastic. They're amazing. But our APIs are getting left behind. So let's do something about that, right? Let's work on something. And when I'm building an API, a lot of the time I need multi-tenancy these days. Most projects I'm working on are multi-tenant projects. So it needs to kind of come out of the box with that. And when we talk about multi-tenancy, most people go straight for tenancy for Laravel. It's kind of the default that most people go for. But I've had issues with it. It's not quite what I want it to do. It doesn't do all of the magical things that I'd like. So I will be using Laravel Sprout by the one and only Ollie Reed. And it's still in beta right now, but it's working. I haven't tested it on Laravel 12 yet, but we're about to do that. So bear with. It's got the tenant identifier. It's got full eloquent support. It uses a shared database approach, which I think a lot of the time I don't need that multi-database support, right? Hello, Steve. Hello, Ollie. Thank you for joining. So, yeah, Ollie, yeah, it's definitely a good package. Ollie kindly put together a demo for me of steps to take to get this actually working. So I've got my project over here. I've called it Template. Super original name. Everyone should use that package. I completely agree, Ollie. Sprout actually just works really well. So where are we? Okay, so we install Sprout, which I have done. I have installed Laravel Sprout. If I come down to my composer, you will see it there, 1.x.dev. And I am using Laravel 12. Just added that dev flag. If I break it, you can fix it. That's handy. I'm going to hold you to that, Ollie, for everything that I ever do. Hey, Joe. Right, remove overrides that we don't need. So the cache cookie session, yeah, we definitely don't need all of those. So if we come down to here, I probably need to tell you what, I'm going to put my face over this side. No. Where am I? I've lost my face. There I am. Ah. Okay, so let's do a quick vendor publish and look for Sprout config. There we go. I've got the Sprout config. So the overrides that I need to do are Sprout overrides. Come down into here. Now, session, we don't need a session because it's an API. There's that. Yeah, cookie, also don't need a cookie because I'm not doing cookie auth. Ollie isn't biased, not at all. Definitely a unique face. The beard, it's the most memorable thing about me. Watching from the Philippines, fantastic. I'm watching from Wales, where the internet connection is terrible. So we don't want specific cache for each tenant. We do want the auth, so we'll keep that. Sprout file system, so you can create a tenanted. That's right? Tenanted. That sounds wrong. Tenanted. Right, file systems. Let's go to file systems and let's create a tenanted file system, which comes from the local. And apparently that works. I wouldn't know. So add client and make the user belong to the client. So he uses a client class here. What I like to do is make a model called workspace. That's just me. font size. Here we go. So that is that part. And what I also need to do is on our queues, we're going to move the database one to after commit. Like that. Overrides are now done. That is now done. So now I've got this magical database connection and we have got a workspaces table. So Bangladesh. What is it with everyone living in warmer countries coming to say hi and rubbing it in? You're making me jealous, people. Making me very jealous. All right, let's make that static. Okay, so what does he do in his migrations? It needs an identifier and a resource key. These are the two things that you need to get it to work, basically. So we know we need these two things. And I like ULIDs. Like that. That's what I like. Hey, Sunny Birmingham. Hey, Dan. How you doing, buddy? Can you increase font size more? I can. That big? This big? There we go. There we go. And look at the screen. Wow. Whoa, that's really it's not super sunny in Wales. So, not great. Awesome. Drop unique users, unique. Okay. I like what he did there. Let's drop that in there. So we're going to go and make that static and do that. Add a foreign workspace ID. We're going to constrain that to workspaces. And this needs to be a foreign ULID, which will be indexed. We're going to constrain it, and we will add that cascade. Drop unique index, yes. Unique workspace and email, yes. That all looks good. Like, I mean, do I need a name and description? I mean, I'll do it, but I don't think it's strictly needed. So there we go. We got all of that stuff there. What if from Ghana? Welcome. So we've got our workspace and we're updating our user down there. So what we need to do is just update our user migration. So what we'll do is we'll just declare that as static and we'll say that's a ULID primary like that. Let's take that email, verify that, and let's move that there. And we're going to add some soft deletes. So we've got our ID at the top, then we've got name, email, password. We don't really need that remember token because that's mainly web-based. So I'm going to remove it. And I'm going to leave the rest there for now. All the other things I might kind of fix up later. Sessions, I don't really need sessions. I'm going to keep it there. So that foreign ULID, user ID, nullable index, constrained to the users table, and we will cascade that as well. There we go. Yeah, the workspace is a tenant. So that is migrations pretty much good to go at this point. So what I can do is just migrate. Fresh. There we go. So what I need is this cache table. Let me just clean this up quickly so it doesn't bother me. This bit's not important, so I won't zoom in. Let's just clean that up. Then this jobs table, just clean this up too. Don't need the comments. Don't need that. We can do that, and we can do that. And then personal access tokens. This is where we need to pay a little bit of attention because obviously I've got Laravel Sanctum installed, but I'm not going to be doing the cookie approach. So this needs to be a ULID morph. Name, token, abilities, bloody, bloody, blah. Okay, so what I want to, yes, I've disabled session. I've disabled the session override because it's API only. API only. Best way to be. Right. Okay. So that's all that done. That's all that done. User factory. Let's just clean this up so we can go ahead and just extend the factory for the user. Set the model to be the user class. That is a class string for a user. We're going to grab this and we're just going to do that. Then remove that. Get rid of that bit here. Please focus on tenants of customer. I'm focusing on tenants. Don't worry. Do not worry. I'm not focusing on custom auth. I'm still using Sanctum. I'm just going to be using API tokens. There we go. Faker, faker, faker. All good, all good. User factory. Let's just get rid of that. That's all good. That's all good. Right. So let's come over to our user now. And what we need to do is our user needs to belong to a tenant. So if we come to our user quickly, we can say use belongs to tenant. Our user is now what you would class as tenant aware, which is great. It's what we need, right? Really. Drop that in. We'll clean that up. Don't need that remember token, which is good. As factory and use has ULIDs and use soft deletes. There we go. That is all of that. All of that is good. That needs removing. So far, so good. User, yeah, I know. I need to add that user workspace relation. So our user, I'm using Laravel Sprout. So public function workspace. So this belongs to turn this belongs to the related model is my workspace model. And the foreign key is that workspace ID, which obviously needs to get added up here. Yep, just add the tenant relation attribute to it and you're golden, basically. So there's that belongs to. That is all good. So what we need to do is a tenant relation. And that is it. That's all that needs. These things really annoy me. But hey, we'll get around to that at some point in the future, I think. Right now, it is not super important. So then we need to go down to our client. There it is up here. So has factory, is tenant, has tenant resources. So let's come to our workspace. We need to say use has ULIDs. Then we need to tell it that it is a tenant. Use is tenant. Use has tenant resources. Fix all that up. Let's work on the fillable. A list of strings. So what we want is not the jobs or the cache, the users. We want the workspace stuff. So let's focus on that. So what we've got is a name, description, identifier, and resource key. So we've got our name, description, identifier, and resource key. Fantastic. The tenant and has resources. Yep, implements tenant. tenant. Tenant has resources. And there we go. That is now fully hooked up to be a tenant at this point. And what we can, I believe we could say public function users has many, return this has many related user class. Foreign is user ID. All good. So that is now all set up. It is connected to the user. The user is connected to the tenant. At this point, database-wise, I would say that it is done. So it doesn't work with multiple databases yet, but it will do. So config multi-tenancy. Now we need to make sure that Laravel knows about our kind of tenancy setup. So our tenancy is going to be our workspaces. I believe that is correct. Provider is workspaces. Resolver is, I've got subdomain currently, but I will now, and I will keep that. Then down in our tenancies, we've got tenants there. That needs to be swapped to workspaces. Provider is workspaces. And that is it, other than the model. Private Eloquent model. Where is that one? Here it is. Providers. Not that. Providers is workspaces, Eloquent, and this is going to be our workspace class. And we will simplify that one. And there we go. The tenanted domain environment variable, if you're using subdomains. I will probably avoid subdomains, if I'm honest. If I'm honest, this is going to be using the header because it's an API and it should be stateless. Stateless APIs, the way we like them. We can remove the other resolvers if we don't want to use them. Like subdomain, we're not going to use. All of those we're not going to use. We're going to focus in on the header for now. I'm going to remove them, but you don't actually need to. You could just kind of ignore it. So there is that part done. Tenant relation to the user, that has been done. API routes, and I just need to start this part. Okay, so at this point, close all tabs. I'm going to migrate fresh. Fantastic. And what I'm going to do is in my seeder, I am going to make a workspace. So workspace, factory, create. So we've got a name, and the name for this is going to be Steve King. The description is going to be, this is my workspace, hands off. The identifier is going to be just Steve King. And the resource ID, I'm not 100% sure what that needs to be. So let's come back and check this stuff. Client factory. That can just be a UUID. So that is fine. I'm going to leave that empty. And then what we will do is create me. Google, we'll drop in my email. And then the workspace ID is going to be the workspace ID. Yeah, UUID is absolutely fine for this. I do need to get this working. So the name is this Baker. I'm just going to say like a unique company name. The description is just going to be this Baker We're just going to add a real text in there. What else does it need? It needs an identifier. This Baker unique username. And the resource ID, I'm just going to say this Baker UID. Like that. We'll say that the model is the workspace. Class string for that workspace. And then this will extend the factory for the workspace. Fix all that up. Grab that. Shorten it. Done. Nice and clean. Yeah, it's so simple. The way that this works. I don't think I need to do any casts or anything on the client. I believe that's all handled by the tenant resource stuff. Yeah, set attribute, resource key name, UUID. All done. All done for me. Just how I like it. Awesome. So let's migrate fresh seed. Oof, I broke it. Right. Column resource ID of relation workspaces does not exist. Ooh, what did I call it? What did I call it? Resource key. Resource key. There we go. That was a Steve boo-boo. We get used to those around here. So that is my tenant set up at this point. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and grab an API client like so. We're going to create a new workspace called Template API. The environment is going to be base URL is going to be https template.test. Let me just open up Herd a second and make sure that template is on HTTPS. That is all good. So next up, we need to come to our roots, and our API is going to be a tenanted. So root, this is where I need to go see, double check the spelling, basically, because this is all the magic stuff. So tenanted stuff. Let me just grab this for now. And we're just going to do that. There we go. That's static and it will return void. Awesome. So if I now do an a root list, we have got /users. Yak is awesome. It's built by the person who built Insomnia to begin with until he sold it. So I'm just going to do a quick API request. Can I zoom in? View, zoom in, zoom in. This is the biggest problem that I've found with having a split keyboard is actually pretty difficult to zoom. But yeah. Okay, so base URL. Send that. We are sending that through to sample test. So then we can just say, let's go back to that environment a second. Yeah, that's all good. /users. Awesome. We got an error. No valid tenant ID found in the header. So header. What we need to do is say, I need to remind myself of this bit now. Let's see. Is it my docs? Tenant identity resolvers. It's not ret. It's not ready. Okay. It is being actively developed, so bear that in mind. Ollie, if you're online, what is it's something, tenant identifier. There we go. Tenant identifier, just Steve King. No valid workspaces found. Class open header identity resolver. So what this is going to do is tenancy. What's that tenancy bit about? Chat driven. Basically, anytime last time I worked on this, I used I was talking to Ollie, our workspaces identifier. There we go. We've got somewhere. So last time I did this, I spoke to Ollie and I was like, so what am I doing? And he just walked me through it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to hide my face so you can focus in on the code because that's kind of the important thing here. So we're able to get a list of users for this tenant. And if we said Laravel, for example, it would be a different one. So let's just focus on this. There we go. So that is that. Then we've got to work through our routes. So let's do, no, don't want to do that. More actions. Can I get it just to ignore it? Disable inspection. There we go. We're just going to keep it like that for now. I'm going to ignore that squiggle at the top because that's just going to annoy me. It's a macro, which is fine. It's what you typically do. So what we want to do at this point is keep building our API, right? So we got this multi-tenant API. And what I'm going to do in my database seeder, once I've created me, I'm going to create another workspace as well. So let's do that. Let's just create 2 workspaces. So what I can do is if I come to herd quickly, I can just go ahead and say template actions IDE. No, I've already got that open. Actions in table plus. Here we go. Wrong window. Let's get table plus into the mix. So you'll see that I've got these 2 workspaces here. And the identifier is apparently that. No users. Users. Fantastic, right? I would love to see an alternative to that. Okay, so what we're also going to want to say is we want to accept application JSON. Content type is always going to be application JSON. And the content, what is it? Content encoding. Accept encoding. We will accept gzip basically if it needs to. So that is a request done. The package is actually really, really good. It's so much easier to work with. So that is that part. We've got nothing else in here. We've got Laravel Sanctum. We've got a personal access token here, which extends the Sanctum one because I wanted to add my own. It gives me a little bit more control. And what I want to do, okay, so when we authenticate, what we want to do is, let's say this is a standalone API. Typically, when you're working on a standalone API, you'll have, let's say, a mobile client. You will end up sending a name for that API token on that initial request to get the access token. And you'd probably say, iOS app or Android app. And if it's Raycast extension, for example, it'll be Raycast extension. If it's your SPA or your other app, you'd do follow the naming in that convention. So what I want to do is let's just add authentication. Now, I don't want to do the cookie stuff because I don't find that useful. So I'm going to say, let's add our auth in here, and we're going to have a login controller. Let's zoom in and let's get this done. So public function construct like so. Nope. Invoke. And what we need is a request for login request. Now, this is where I'm usually pretty cheeky, and I go to GitHub, Laravel, please, and I go ahead and grab not that bit. I need the API, app, HTTP, middleware. No, request, login request. There we go. I usually grab this like so. So what we're going to do, we're just going to steal this for now. Login request. We're going to grab that and we're just going to dump that in there. And we will import the rate limiter facade. And we're going to import the validation exception, the string helper. What else do we need? Simplify that. That can be simplified to a standard array. That isn't actually needed. Yeah, this package is so cool. It seriously just works out of the box. Fix up that file quickly. Right, okay, so this could throw a validation exception. That's not a big deal. Rules, blah, blah. Then we want to remove this, remember, because we don't actually use it. Then we can import the auth helper for now. That's all good. Rate limit clear. Let's add that lockout event. Then this is expects a string. Okay, string, email to string. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. But the way that this builds this up is that it's getting the request IP, right? Yeah, sorry, I will zoom in. I will zoom in and explain it. Hello, I've got a visitor. Okay, so this form request currently, I don't believe it has a constructor, which means that I can add my own constructor, which I like to do. So we'll add that constructor there. And what we're going to want is a private read-only workspace as workspace. But this is going to be the current tenant. Like that. So that is our current tenant. So when we're building up this string here for the throttle key, we want to throttle it on a per tenant basis. This string email to string. And instead of saying this IP, I'm going to say this workspace ID. Because if that person's making a request, I want them to make sure that their requests are throttled to the workspace in question, so that if you've got a script to work across different workspaces, then it's not a big deal, right? But it's still going to limit it to the email. So that's all of that. That's all of that. And what we could probably do as well. Why does that got a extends form request, extends request? It could be. Let's add this request. No. Let's have a look. It shouldn't be missing a request construct call. Request, where's the constructor? No, it should just be able to get that. Okay, so I'm going to ignore that. Okay, so this authenticate. Maybe what I can do here instead is pass in the string for the workspace ID to avoid those issues. So then when we're getting this throttle key, from there, we need to pass that workspace ID down to here. Come to the throttle key, that accepts that, and then this is a workspace ID, which means we don't need to inject that there. I'm going to inject the tenant into the controller and pass it through to this method. Throttle key invoked with one parameter. This throttle key, workspace ID. There we go. That should ensure is not rate limited. Let's drop that in there and do that. Ensure is not rate limited. Also needs that passed in. Throttle key is also there. All good. All good, all good. So in our login controller, what we want to do here is say login request as our request. Then in our constructor up here, what we will do instead is say private read-only workspace as workspace. And then this is going to get the current tenant. And then make that read-only. So we want to request authenticate where the workspace ID is this workspace ID. There. Fix that whole file. Just fix it all up. Fix it all up. Authenticate. That is potentially going to throw an exception. Workspace ID. So what I need is to go to the workspace and let's just add this property string ID on it. Like so. That should shut that up. That is now there. Fantastic. Cool. So we've now authenticated at this point, right? Because this authenticate method is going to ensure it's not rate limited. Then it's going to attempt authentication. Throw in a validation exception if need be. And if it does authenticate, we're going to clear the rate limiter. Whew. And it just handles all of that for us. So next, what we want to do is we want to say that the request user, we want to create a token, right? This is where we're getting our API token for. But before we can do that, we need to make some middleware. And we're going to call this middleware integration name header. So the purpose of this is basically to ensure that the request has got the header where needed. Has header, and this could be like X integration name, for example. So if it's not set, then what we want to do is throw a new invalid argument exception, and we are going to simplify that. And the message is going to be the request must contain that header. So the code that I want to send back with this is going to come from Symfony response, HTTP bad request, like that. Otherwise, we can just keep moving on. So the idea here is if this, there we go. If this does not work, then yeah, not bothered by that. If the X integration name is not added on that specific route, then we want to just kill it. And it's only needed for login and register, really. So what we can do is we can create an alias here. An identifier is integration name header class. Done. Simplify that. Come back to our roots so we can test it. So API roots. And for this, we'll just tack it on the end. Ooh. Middleware identifier, like that. So if we grab that now and say, I don't know, let's grab warp and let's just say, what's our host name? There we go. That. Bam. We got the host name at that point, right? So this login controller is going to then create the token where the name is going to be request header X integration name. The abilities is going to be all, and the expiry expires. I'm not too sure on the expiry date, but that's all we need at this point. So this bit here, this create token, this is a database interaction, right? And we all know that when you're doing database interactions, what are we on about? If you click the three dots on the left hand of a project pane, view mode, doc unpinned. Don't know what that does. Okay, I'm getting distracted. So what we also want to inject is a private, already got the read-only, database manager as the database, and we want to wrap this in a transaction, right? So this database, we can like begin a transaction here, and then this database commit up there. So token equals that, basically. And then this should be a new access token, in theory. And after that, what we'll do is we'll do a die and dump on the token and just see what happens. So let's go register that route quickly. So router, I'm going to post to login, and we're going to go to that login controller. For now, we're just going to keep it super simple. So let's change this to a post request. Login, we're hitting there, which is great, which means we can say body, we want a JSON body, and we want the email to be just stevemcd@gmail.com. And the password is obviously password. Bang, we've got an access token. Now, what you can do, obviously, is if you don't want to do this begin transaction and commit, you can just say this database transaction, like so. The function or the callback is going to be this. This is what I'd usually do. And I'd say attempt it 3 times or 4 times, whatever it might be. And grab all of that and remove. And then this would then be token. And then this would be a new access token up the top there. And then what we want is just to fix all that up. And we could potentially add that throws tag as well. And we will simplify. We are going to simplify that. And we are going to inline this. So that's all of that. That's potentially polymorphic. And right, okay, let's try it again. Send. We've got an access token. Fantastic. We are getting there, right? So we got this access token for our API, which is very specific to a tenant. There's the integration name. And if we come back to Table Plus and just quickly refresh, we can come to personal access tokens. For that user, that's a tokenable ID, and there's the name. Now, the name is not unique, but yeah, it helps. So how can we make it better? Abilities. Abilities are what we need here. So we need that current tenant in here in some way. So we need to say this workspace ID something like that. So let's migrate fresh and seed. Make sure we got nothing in there. Ooh, what happened? That happened. Bam. So we now got a token. And if we refresh that, you'll see that our abilities are mapped specifically to that workspace. However, that ID probably isn't what I want. I probably want the identifier in reality. So let's just swap it to that, and let's make sure that's accessible. So we will add a string for the name. A nullable description. What else we got? We got a description, then we got a property string for the identifier. Then we've got a string for that resource key. Then we've got the carbon interface null for created at, and then we'll have the same for the updated at. So now if we come back here, this tenant identifier actually does work. That's going to complain, but not a big deal. IDE helper methods. I used to use the IDE helper methods, but I always found they were a little bit, it didn't work for me. So next up, we want to say responses, and we're going to have a token response. Now, this token response is going to implement responsible, which means it needs to have that method stub, which means it needs to return a new JSON response where the data is something and the status is something, and the headers are something. This also needs to return a response, and then we need to add a constructor. So when we create a new token response, we are going to have a string for the token. We are also going to have a read-only int for the status, which will default to response HTTP OK. Make that read-only. Do that. Then this can say this token. This can say this status, and headers we will come back to. So in our login controller, what we can do here instead is return a new token response, where the token is token plain text token, and we don't need to do anything with the status code because it's going to be the default. We have not created anything other than the token, which is a side effect. Because it's not really a resource, it's a response. A resource is something like the user or the workspace or something else. So now, again, if I come ahead and go log in, I've now got my API token, like so, which means I can come to my environment and say token is that. So I can come back and add router, middleware, auth sanctum, group, static function, void. This also needs to use the router. So now the router can get users. We're going to remove that identifier off of this bit here because that's actually not needed there. That can be removed. Router, middleware identifier, group. I'm going to do like an as auth. We'll probably prefix auth as well. And then say static function, use router, move login, hopefully into it. Right, now if I do a root list, hopefully that didn't break anything, all good, auth login. So if we swap that to auth login, I can send to there. I've already got a token that's valid, so I can then just say users, send, get, send, unauthenticated. If I go to auth, I can go there and I can say token variable, send. Ta-da! Authentication, multi-tenanted auth using API tokens in Laravel. Less than an hour. Nice and simple. So how would I move forward with this, though? That is the question. So what we've got up the top here is we've got our roots. And what we want to do is basically organize them a little bit, right? I don't know if Ollie's still online, but I'm at the can I implement tenanted in multiple places, or do I have to pass through router and build it out that way? Because what would be nice is if I could get auth roots all in one place. So for example, I could say auth.php like so, then basically just copy this import that, import the router, like that. And then what I can do is use that like so. Come back to here. And I believe instead of putting that in there, I should be able to say base path, where the path is routes API auth.php. Auth. What's going on? Got a red squiggle. So all of that there. I wouldn't need that or that. Just this. Bang. Done. Go to Bootstrap, and I like to organize it so it's discoverable. So what you can see is when you come to your API route list here, you go, okay, so I've got all of my auth routes up here. And then let's say user resource routes. And what we then end up having is users.php. And then this bit here is then basically just copied over into here. So you've doubled the tenanted. It's just a call though, isn't it? Because all this does, so if I do a quick search for root macro, anything within here, tenanted, don't know where it is, function tenanted router methods. So all it's doing is resolving routes using the tenancy manager. It's just the same as doing a group in my eyes. So let's say we've got users over here. What we want to do is say, what I'd do is do the middleware for auth sanctum. Obviously do the group, static function, use that router, not going to return anything, but then this router, we're going to group by stuff or as users, prefix users, group. Again, base path, where the path is the routes API users.php. And then I can grab that and just delete that. Inside here, I want that, but first I need to grab this, import the facade, and import the router. So this is now in here. Import the users, come back to our routes, which means my auth routes are up the top. Then my authenticated routes are here, where I am splitting out based on resource. And root users cannot be found. Users Flash. There we go. So we've got that part all working. Awesome. So the next step, once all of that is done, is to start working on something a little bit cleaner. So let's make a resource for the user. And we also want a resource for the workspace. I always make an extra one for dates. And I'll walk you through that bit. So the date resource over here, what we want to do is this will accept property carbon interface as that resource. It doesn't just have to be eloquent models that you are passing into these resources. It's just a way for you to transform data however you need to. So here I would say human, and I can say this resource diff for humans. And then we pass it through as a string as well. This resource to ISO something string. All good, all good. And fix all that up. Then we can go to that user resource. Put this in, and we can say that the property user resource, and then we can say on this bit, the ID is this resource ID. The name is this resource name. Email, this. Okay, so email I like to do differently. I say email address, and I say this resource email verified. This resource has verified email. When was it created? New date resource, where the resource is this resource created at, and then we can say workspace, new workspace resource. The resource we're going to pass through on this one is this, when loaded, relationship is going to be workspace. Like that. So our users over here, instead of doing this users all like this, we can say we can do a user resource collection where the resource is user query. We're going to simple paginate it like that. And there we go. We've got something a little bit nicer. Come over to our workspace resource. We just need to set the property for the workspace as the resource up there. We're going to inline that doc block. And then the ID is this resource ID. The name is this resource description. This resource description. Identifier. This resource identifier. Resource key. I mean, I don't think we need the resource key on the API, but hey, you never know. For now, I'll keep it. And then it was created new date resource, where the resource is this resource created at. Send it again. And now we've got something a little bit cleaner. So that resource key, I don't think is something that you'd need. So there we go. We've got our response all formatted the way we might want to. Fantastic. Fix all that up. Next up, let's make another request, HTTP requests and responses. And I like to create a paginated collection response. So this implements responsible. Add some method stubs. This is going to return a response. Return new JSON response. Data is something, and the status is, we're just going to set this manually here, actually. This status, we'll fill that in. And then the headers, for now, we'll just do that. Public function construct. So when we're building up this request, we can say private read-only anonymous resource collection as the data. We're going to have a read-only integer for the status, which is going to be response HTTP OK. Keep that like that for now. And then this data like so. Then in this, what we can do instead, we can grab that. Simplify that a second. Resource collection there. Grab this and return a new paginated collection response where the data is that. Send. Fantastic. We're getting there. Yeah, we don't always have the same agreement, do we, Kat? Since you're using a JSON resource, you don't need to do a response JSON. Probably not, but I do. I like to be declarative with things. There we go. There's all that. And fix the whole file. Looking good, looking good. Okay. So that squiggle is constantly going to annoy me, but I'm just going to live with it for now. So we can get our users, we can log in. Where our API is starting to look absolutely fantastic. What we will do is just quieten down some of these other errors. And we're going to say property string ID, property string for the name, and the email, and the password, and the workspace ID. We got a carbon interface, null for the email verified at. Null for that created at. Then we're going to have the same for updated at and the same for deleted at. So then we're going to have a property workspace for the workspace like so. And that's all good. Now, the next step is to create a new model. And we're going to create a abstract tenant model. Now, this abstract tenant model, what it needs to do is have a public function workspace inside of it, which is a belongs to. So we need to add a mixin for the model. Turn this abstract class tenant, there we go. This belongs to, related is a workspace class, and the foreign key is workspace ID. And then I believe we have got that tenant relation up there. Now, if I just quickly open the user model, we need to add that use belongs to tenant, I believe. Abstract class tenant extends model, which means we can remove that mix in. Right, okay, so let's go to that next step and let's do a what can we do? Because this is a template, I don't want to implement too much. So something like something deletable, like a project. Make a model project, migrate and factory, done. So close all these off, come down to our database and let's go fill that in. So projects table. We can delete that, fix it all up and make that like that. ULID, ID, primary, table, on ULID for that workspace ID, which will be an index. It will be constrained to the workspaces table, and it will cascade. Table string for the name, and a table string for the description. Simple simples. Right. We've got a project that has a name and a description and belongs to a workspace. It's really, really simple little model. Think something like super simple, like a Trello style project or a board, really, isn't it? So this extends the factory for the project. We can add the model in per project. This is a class string of a project. Grab this returnee type. So name. This Baker, this is a company name, and a description can be this Baker real text, and then the workspace ID is going to be a workspace factory. Come over to our project, and then instead of this, what we can do, we can grab that a second, and we're going to extend the abstract tenant. Now, all of our models are going to have some level of factory. So we can move that in there. We can also know that they're all going to have ULIDs. So we can drop that in there, which means that can be removed because it's not needed. Then all we need is the fillable fields, like that. And that's going to have a list of strings. Then we can fix that. And that doesn't actually need anything else. User is no longer valid on the abstract. Oh, no, it might not be. Right, let's just remove that. Hopefully, it should pick it up anyway. It's going to complain, but it's an abstract, so it's out the way. Yeah, I think the resource key would definitely make more sense to be ULID over a UID because of the index, but also they're sortable. That's the biggest benefit I find with ULIDs is that they are, they're hashed integers in effect, aren't they? So we have a project, and a workspace has many projects. So we've got to add the relationship to this part here. So public function projects has many. Return this has many related project class. And the foreign key is a workspace ID. Awesome. So up here, what we need to add is the property going to return an eloquent collection of a user or users. And we're also going to add a property collection int project for projects. Next up, we will say make a resource for that project resource. Fantastic. Open that up. Property project resource. Grab this. Grab that. ID is this resource. ID name this resource name. The description this resource description. We want to have the when was it created, so a new date resource. The resource is created at, and then the workspace down the bottom, we can say new workspace resource. The resource is this when loaded, and the relationship is the workspace. Like that. Awesome. We've created a ticket. Ollie has created a ticket. Okay. So all of that is now done. Come over to here. What we can actually do, we can say property string ID, property string name, property string description, workspace ID, property carbon interface null for the created at. You can do the carbon interface null for that updated at, and then we can do a workspace. All of that, and that project resource should now clear up. Now, what we can also do in here is say projects and say project resource collection this when loaded relationship projects, like that. Yeah, that's the biggest benefit I found with ULIDs is the sortability. So that's all good. All good so far. One package that I always like to install: Composer, Require, Sparsy, Laravel, Query, Builder. It's probably one of the most useful packages I've used. Okay, so it's not quite ready for Laravel 12. So I'm going to have to wait to load that, which is a shame, but it is what it is. So that is a workspace. We've got projects. So what we can do just to kind of take it that step further, let's go through one more request, such as creating a project. So let's go new file projects. And in here, what we want to do is say, we're going to obviously declare our strict types, and we're going to use the root facade like that. And we need to say root tenanted static function void. This needs to use the router. So this can then be simplified. Zoom out just a little bit. Here we go. Here we go. So we're going to have the router get. And give that a name of index. But we'll come back to that one. Router post name store. So up here, we're going to want to say use app HTTP controllers projects. That's not going to load yet, but we can say projects store controller class. That would be what we're going to end up creating. So up in our controllers, we have our directory for projects. Here's our projects namespace. And now we can create that store controller. Zoom in. Public function, we're going to make that invocable. And we'll deal with that other bit in a minute. That should now click through, and we will just we'll keep it like that for now. So make a request projects store request. Now this should already be limited to the tenant, and we can inject the tenant. So up here we can say public function, we can say construct, and we can do two things. We can say the current tenant is a private read-only workspace, and we can also say current user is a private read-only user. Because these are two things that we can now inject, which is amazing. So we could say store request as request. Once we've validated all of the data, we are pretty much good to go. So to create a project, it needs a name, which is required. Could be a string, no less than 3, no more than 255. And again, same thing for the description. So required string. I probably would do a min of 3 on that as well, just because fix all of that up. And then this is going to return an array of string array or string list string in this particular case. So what we want to do here is we want to return a singular resource or a message or something. Now, if we're going to create this synchronously, I would use a specific response like a model response, for example. Model response. And this would be implementing responsible. Add those method stubs, public function, construct, just like before. And then this would have a private read-only JSON resource for the data, and then private read-only int status is response HTTP. Okay. This can return a response. Return a new JSON response. The data is this data. The status is this status. And the headers is something I deal with much later. Make all of that read-only. So you can just return the model response passing in the resource of what you just created. However, most of the times when I'm building an API, I don't want that synchronous blocking behavior. Bit of a pain. So there's ways you can get around that. You can use the dispatchable background jobs, but then you're still doing a write operation, right? My latest trick is something a bit different. I will make the job first. Make a job, projects, create new project. Do it like that for now. So I will come over here and I will create a directory called payloads. Within here, I will then have a projects and a new project. So this is a simple plain old PHP object, DTO style, where we're going to have a public read-only string for the name and a public read-only string for the description. Make it read-only. So our store request, we want to be able to get the payload from it. This will return a new project. We can return a new project like that, where the name is this string name to string, and the description is that. That's that. So then we've got that create new project job over here, which is queuable. What we're able to do is say we will have a public read-only new project as a payload. We're also going to have a public read-only string for the workspace. Fix all that up. Delete that. My laptop is getting awfully slow. I've not restarted it all week. Well, probably the last 3 weeks, if I'm completely honest. Okay, so in our store controller, we probably don't need that user, right? We could do some authorization checks. Authorization check on current user. That's something for later. So then what we want is to dispatch the job to create a new project and then return a response. But if we dispatch them a job, we're not actually creating the resource. So what we need is a separate response, which I call a message response. The tenant is available while in a job. Is it? I prefer to pass it through if I'm completely honest. Method stub, like so. Going to return that response and return new JSON response there. Add the constructor. We have a private read-only string message and a private read-only int status response HTTP. Okay. So make that read-only. This JSON response over here, we can say data, message, status, headers, done. So this is going to return that new message response, where the message is we have accepted your request. And the status is something different. We've accepted the request. We are going to deal with it, basically. So that's that message response. So the authorization check, not a big deal. That's a simple gate check. Dispatching a new job. Now, do we want to do this inline? Likely not. So let's inject that dispatcher, the bus, like so. And what we'd do typically is say this bus dispatch. The command I'm dispatching is a new create new project where the payload is request payload and the workspace is this workspace ID. Yeah, that is going to do it. That is going to do it nicely. But again, it is a write operation at the end of the day. Do we want that write operation blocking things? Probably not. Let's just fix all that file up. There we go. User's not being used. Tell you what, I'll remove the user because we're not using it currently. Like that. So what I like to do is grab all of this, delete it, and say, let's defer actually dispatching the job until the response has been finished, right? We can give it a name. I don't really know what the name does, but give it a name. We can say use function that. So there we go. Now we are completely non-blocking. So yeah, I'm more interested in passing the workspace instead of juggling the mappers and all of that bootstrapping stuff. So we can also authorize later, not a big deal. We're going to defer the processing to later on. Then we're going to dispatch, creating the payload from the name and description, grabbing the workspace from where you're currently logged in, and we're just going to return a response. Now, all of that to say, let's open up routes.php and make sure we add this. So user resource routes, and then project resource routes. You can say projects, projects, projects. Now, if we do a quick route list, we see we've got projects. So what we'll do is we will do a post request projects. JSON payload, I'm going to delete. So we need the name. Laravel. Description. Build an API template. We have accepted your request. 202. Table plus. Let's go look at projects. And I haven't actually migrated that yet, which is funny. Now we can migrate. Projects is in there. So we've got projects there, and all we need to do is, if we run composer dev, we're listening to the queue, we're running, and that job doesn't actually do anything yet. Create new project. So here we go. Last thing, database manager, database transaction, Call back. And say project query create, and we're going to attempt it max of 3 times. Now the attributes, give me an array merge of this payload. I'm going to add a toArray method, and then a workspace ID is this workspace. Public function toArray, which is going to return an array. Return that name, this name, and description is this description. Now I can be super specific on this and say I'm going to return an array, and we're going to have a name string and a description string. So I can add that array shape in there. So create new project, that's all good. Just need to add that comma and then fix that up like that. That is there, that is there. And then this could throws throwable. That could potentially throw an exception from the transaction. This dispatch should dispatch after response. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it is a good point. Can I dispatch now, dispatch sync, and dispatch? A dispatch after response would be cool because that would probably just trigger the defer. So that is all of that. So now if I just refresh that, all good. We've accepted your request, and now it's in there. And that was a super quick. Accepted your request. Accepted your request. Obviously, I've created loads. So what we want to do is add rate limiting. And I'll probably add that at that global level or on each resource. So down here on projects, for example, I'll probably say middleware, Throttle, 30 in a minute. I don't want you to do more than that. And you can space that out, figure it out how you want to. But I am back. I'm here. I'm Steve. That is what I would do. So what I will do next for my next trick is github.new. We're going to see if we can just create this template in here. Template. And we're going to say Laravel 12 API starter git. Create the repository. Cancel that. Git init. Git add. Git commit. Starting the API. So we can grab that git branch minus m main, git push minus u origin. Yeah. Minus u origin main. Ooh, okay. Let me have a quick look. So dispatch down there. No, it doesn't let you. Right, so now if I refresh, we have got our Laravel 12 starter kit. You can go to just div king template. And obviously it is a work in progress. It's multi-tenanted. And what I've got here, I'm going to use PHP v3 for preset arch, team management, nested describes, mutation testing, and dependency testing using depends. We're using Sprout for multi-tenancy, obviously Laravel Pint, PHP Stan, and we're going to use Scramble for the open API docs. So that's where we are. I've done like almost an hour and 40 minutes, and today's meant to be my relaxing day. So I'm going to leave it there. Say thank you all for joining. That was a lot of, Steve demo is private. Open up that README, Laravel Sprout, I think it is. Yeah. Git add. Git commit. Fix Laravel Sprout link. Git push. So there you go. That is me done. I'm going to spend the rest of the day with my wife, my children, enjoy some time off. You stay awesome. I'll catch you next time. See you later. Bye-bye.